back. So it's 11, so we could start. So guten Tag, good morning, bonjour, Jumbo. So welcome to this panel session. What if a herbal plant could treat malaria? So I am Guillaume Deprey and I will moderate this session. So a few things before starting. The webinar is recorded and the link will be available on Tuesday, 16th of November. If you could keep your camera and micro off as listener during the session. So thank you for that. And there will be question and answers at the end. So you could write during the session your question in the chat. So before starting this session, I'm going to ask to the speaker to introduce themselves. I could say I'm very shy to moderate this session because I am the only non-scientific person, but promise I will do my best. Maybe Dr. Laktabai, would you like to introduce yourself? Would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. My name is Jeremiah Laktabai from Kenya. I work in Mérieux University as a lecturer in the Department of Family Medicine and Medical Education. And I also work in AMPATH, heading the AMPATH Population Health Department. And within Mérieux University and AMPATH, I'm part of a malaria research group that does a lot of implementation research on malaria in Western Kenya. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laktabai. Dr. Cornet-Vernet, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks. Thank you, Guillaume. I'm Lucile Cornet-Vernet. I'm an orthodontist, but I founded 9 years ago an NGO called La Maison de l'Artemisia, and I will tell you more just after.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barale.
Thank you, Guillaume. Guten Tag, ladies and gentlemen, bonjour. So I'm a senior scientist at the French National Center for Scientific Research, and I head a group at the Pasteur Institute. And the two keywords of our work is design new antimalarial candidates, and we are working on the mechanism of resistance of Plasmodium parasites, particularly toward artemisinin, in collaboration with Benoit Witowski, particularly in Pasteur Institute of Cambodia.
Thank you, Mr. Barale. Professor Borrmann?
Yes, thank you. Hello to everyone. My name is Steffen Borrmann. I'm from the University of Tübingen, and we work in close collaboration with the CNRS, a clinical research institution based in Lambaréné in Gabon. My background is clinical medicine, with an emphasis on parasitology, and I have been a track record of more than 20 years of research for improving the treatment of malaria.
Thank you, Professor Borrmann. Dr. Hagels?
Yeah, good morning to all, bonjour. A warm welcome to you all. I'm very excited to participate in the meeting today, and yeah, some words of my background. I'm a trained pharmacist specialized in herbal medicinal raw materials and medicinal products, and I'm with Boehringer for overall now 15 years. In my last role with Boehringer, I was responsible for medicinal plant breeding and sourcing. Currently, I'm responsible for occupational health and safety with Boehringer.
Thank you. And Mr. Bonneville?
Okay, thank you, Guillaume. Good morning, everybody. So I'm an immunologist by training. I'm currently the scientific and medical director of the Fondation Mérieux, which is working on capacity building on infectious diseases in low and middle income countries.
So thank you, Mr. Bonneville. So before starting, I would like to share with you a short video, and after that we will have the opportunity to discuss together.
Hi, Guillaume, there is no audio. We cannot hear the audio from the video. Yeah.
Excuse me, I don't know why, but people tell me there is no sound. So if we could, see why there is no sound, just, is it okay now? No? Okay.
No.
Okay, so it doesn't matter, I don't know. Is someone from Technic could help us, or the people left? No? Oh, okay. So I think it's, I will send to the participants the video because it is about the malaria, but I think what is more important is to have the discussion together and to discuss about this Artemisia opportunity. So my first question, and sorry for this issue with and sorry for the issue with the sound. So my first question will be to the Dr. Laktabai. Could you tell us about malaria in Africa, how people are treated, and why does malaria continue to have a high rate of mortality, especially in children under 5?
Thank you so much. So yes, as you said, malaria remains a major cause of morbidity and mortality in Africa. According to the estimates, like the WHO in 2019, that globally you've got like over 229 million cases of malaria in 2019, and out of this, 94% are found in the WHO malaria region. That's over 215 million cases, which is sizable. And if you look at the African countries, you know, only 5 countries account for over 51% of these cases. Out of the more than 400,000 deaths that occur from malaria globally, again, majority of this, 95%, more than 380,000, happen in Africa. If you look at children, you know, it says that a child dies of malaria every 2 minutes. And so when you have over 270,000 deaths in a year of children, that's over 67% of all the malaria cases being found in children under 5. Lots of women in pregnancy are exposed to malaria, and it's estimated that because of the malaria in pregnancy, you have more than 800,000 births that are of low birth weight as a consequence of malaria. So yes, it remains a major burden. In children, of course, we do know that the immunity in children under 5 is still low. They haven't yet acquired immunity, even in endemic regions. And secondly, of course, just like other conditions of tropical nature, the resource, there's a limitation in the resource, the socioeconomic instabilities, and the cost of offering care is such that access to care is limited. So children go to hospital when it's late, and the health system being fragile, when the health system is affected by emergencies like we've had COVID-19, you see a shift of resources and efforts away from malaria into emerging conditions, because everything is an emergency and malaria can easily be set aside. So people who are in the rural, the poor, the health-seeking behaviors also differ. In the work we've done in Western Kenya, for a febrile episode, more than 50% of people do not go to a health facility as a first choice. They do self-medication, go for herbal treatment, go for pharmacy or, medicine shops, some regulated, some unregulated, so that in as much as there is guidelines on first line, second line medication, not many people are able to access the care as it should be. So we still have ineffective use of medications. We still have other comorbidities, malnutrition. And so all these things contribute to the burden that we are seeing of malaria in Africa. Yet it's actually preventable and treatable.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laktabai. Dr. Cornet-Vernet, Dr. Laktabai spoke about this terrible disease that presents a huge burden, as he said, in many parts of Africa. And your NGO has a strong presence in Africa, La Maison de l'Artemisia. So could you present your NGO and why did you create this NGO and what are your joys and challenges? And it is a challenge to answer very quickly because there's a large question, but do what you could do.
Thanks. Thank
you.
Yes, La Maison de l'Artemisia is a French humanitarian charity promoting the use of Artemisia annua and Artemisia aphrates in the fight against malaria, targeting the most vulnerable populations. And I founded it 9 years ago after the testimony of one of my friends, Alexandre Poussin. He had a spectacular recovery with the Artemisia annua herbal tea from malaria in a small dispensary in Ethiopia. So since 2012, our NGO has been
so we have an issue with the computer from Lucile. So maybe maybe I think there is a Lucile.
Yes.
So your camera stopped, but no, not an issue. So come back.
Okay. Yes.
I think it's we have to learn with the digital convention.
Sorry,
so it is,
but I did nothing.
No problem. If it is a learning curve and it is the first session, so absolutely no problem with that. We stopped your discussion with a very good example of Alexandre Poussin. So if you could start again with Alexandre Poussin.
Okay, perfect. So after this spectacular recovery of Alexandre, since 2012, we created the NGO, and we has been constantly striving to create a global network of medical doctors, pharmacists, researchers, agronomists, farmers, NGOs, and volunteers working in synergy. Its mission is twofold. First is accelerate research into Artemisia herbal tea and this ancestral treatment for malaria. And second, oversee its sustainable dissemination in malaria endemic countries through local centers of expertise, which we call houses of Artemisia. They coordinate knowledge and distribution of the plants. I'm extremely proud that we have created 120 houses of Artemisia in 27 countries, and they have produced Artemisia tea for 6 million treatments since 2015. Our teams have trained thousands of farmers, done hundreds of awareness-raising sessions, and built a fair trade industry in each country. It's a very active network for the exchange of best practices under the cover of an ethical charter that will evolve towards a label. And in every country, we try to create partnerships with ministries of health and national malaria control programs. And we also make the case for authorization to sell Artemisia annua and Afra in the countries. Our challenge is to ensure that Artemisia tea treatment is totally safe, efficient, and available to all people in need.
Thank you very much for this detailed answer, and it's very impressive, 120 houses of La Maison de l'Artemisia. Thanks a lot. Mr. Barale, we heard Dr. Cornet-Vernet, and from your side, What are you doing on the Artemisia topic at the Pasteur Institute?
Thank you, Guillaume. Let me introduce two concepts before I precisely answer to your question. First is about the Plasmodium parasites, which is responsible for malaria. So this parasite, as you know, is transmitted by mosquito bite, and from the skin, the parasite reaches the hepatocyte, where it enters into hepatocytes, multiplies, and then goes into the blood. And symptoms of malaria are associated to the blood stages. And some of these parasite blood stages are able to go through the another mosquito to resume the cycle. So that's the first thing. Second thing is about artemisinin. So you may know that Professor Yu too, early in the 70s, has discovered artemisinin from Artemisia annua, and artemisinin derivatives are nowadays the first-line treatment associated with a second molecule, which have been defined by WHO as the first-line treatments of malaria. They are called artemisinin combined therapies. So why I'm making this introduction? It's simply because the rationale for working on Artemisia annua is quite understandable from this historical point of view. And our aim is to understand the mode of action of Artemisia on the different stages of Plasmodium. To give you an idea, Professor Mazier here in Paris has very recently published a nice data set of data showing that Artemisia extracts are active against Plasmodium hepatic stages. This is important because we know that artemisinin is not active against hepatic stages. In our lab, we're also able to show that artemisinin contained in Artemisia indeed kills parasites, and eventually in culture could also kill artemisinin-resistant parasites. And we are also working with other colleagues on the transmission from human being to the mosquito. So this mode of action is very important to understand because eventually there is more than one compound that is killing the parasite, artemisinin and eventually others. We would like to set up an overall program to identify these others compounds. Second point we are doing is a very important issue is about the fact that parasites are able to become resistant very quickly. And the question is, are Plasmodium parasites able to become resistant to artemisinin while people are drinking these Artemisia teas? So this is the kind of experiment we are doing in culture in the laboratory with Benoit Witowski in Cambodia, with by cultivating parasites with sublethal doses of Artemisia extracts to see if we can select for artemisinin-resistant parasites. So we are centered on mode of action and eventually resistance.
So thank you very much, Mr. Barale. Professor Borrmann, can you tell us about the clinical researches in Africa? What are the countries? What do you plan to do? What are the timelines? And the clinical study are fully funded? So you are on mute.
Thank you very much, Guillaume, for the questions. Thank you very much also for organizing this. And also thank you to my predecessors to introduce a lot of concepts. So to answer your question, the role of clinical research in malaria or for the treatment of malaria is very simple. So we are here to find out whether a particular treatment is safe and efficacious for the treatment of malaria. And so how do we define this typically? We wish to see whether parasites disappear from the bloodstream by looking through the microscope, sometimes in 6-hourly intervals, sometimes in daily intervals, until parasites have disappeared from the bloodstream. However, this method is not very sensitive, so we keep going and following up patients for up to 4 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks. So in this particular case, we expect to follow up patients for 6 weeks and then see whether infections would we call this process recrudescence. So this is a reappearance of parasites that have been not hiding in the body, but we were not able to detect them by the microscope, and they're growing again after the malaria drugs have been cleared from the bloodstream. So this is a normal process. This is a WHO protocol we use for many years, in my case for more than 20 years now. And so we have successfully evaluated quite a few anti-malaria first-line treatments over the past 2 decades. Coartem, for instance, comes to my mind, but also DHA, piperacin, and many others. And we have also done this to international standards. In this particular case, of course, we would like to do, and we are planning a randomized controlled clinical trial. We all know from the COVID studies that this is the gold standard in clinical sciences. So that's what we are planning in 2 countries, in Gabon, a study, and also a study in Cameroon, where we would also like to start initially looking into the ability of a quality controlled, this is also a very important aspect by these studies, quality controlled tea preparation. So we call this the clinical trial material, where we know exactly the content of the tea, and we would like initially to see whether the parasites are disappearing or not, and how quickly it happens before we move on, again, also in semi-immune adults, into a clinical trial for the treatment. So this is the study set up in short, but of course there are many more details. Importantly, again, I would like to note that these clinical trials are done to international standards. There are also very clearly defined roles for instance, the principal investigator, for the sponsor of the study, where we take out insurances for the patients. These studies are being registered. So it's the whole aspects of these clinical trials, and of course we hope to deliver data, high quality data that will answer the question. As WHO also would need to see this data from a clinical trial that is done according to international standards.
Thank you very much, Professor Borrmann, and thank you also for all this detail about this promising clinical researches. Dr. Hagels, I think there is someone.
I have to put on mute.
Okay, it's better on mute. Thank you. The devil is in the detail, and it is in this panel session. So, but we will fight. Dr. Hagels, yes, you were former head medicinal plant sourcing and breeding with this Boehringer Ingelheim. We speak about phytotherapy, but my first question is it serious when we come from Boehringer Ingelheim and we speak about medicine? So phytotherapy is serious?
Yeah, indeed, phytotherapy is serious. Many people mix therapy, and in particular rational phytotherapy, up with homeopathic medicine or anthroposophic medicine. But there is this huge difference between the two, as rational therapy is evidence-based. And it is anchored in international medical product legislation, which comprises all key registration requirements, such as evaluation of quality, safety, and efficacy of medicinal products. And when it comes to BI, we had such evidence-based phytotherapeutic medical products in our OTC portfolio, which we transferred to Sanofi in our big swap about 5 years ago. So we have some history in working on such medicinal products. Yeah, and when talking about our efforts on Artemisia, and we learned already some background information from Lucile, from Jean-Christophe and Steffen, and we see that there's a lot of chance. When we think of Artemisia, it's also key to ensure that all steps of the product of the production involved are kept in mind. It starts with the knowledge about the genetic materials. Our common efforts profit from the experience La Maison provides and develops over the last years. So we see a lot of chances in the process. And yeah, back to your question, yes, indeed, phytotherapy is very serious. However, it must be rational.
Thank you, Dr. Hagels, for this important clarification. And within Boehringer Ingelheim, why did you decide to support this project? And what is Boehringer's scope of engagement? I could say, how did you get there?
Yeah, the story starts, it started already about 10 years ago. And already 10 years ago, we, in our development activities, we were already involved in work on Artemisia, then focusing on the purification of the main active compound, Jean-Christophe mentioned it already, the artemisinin. Now, with regard to our common efforts now, we had very intensive discussions between several interdisciplinary BI members as well as medical health experts of different scientific disciplines. And we came to the conclusion that supporting the common efforts regarding Artemisia tea in the end will provide a profit for people in vulnerable communities. And on the one hand, they will have the chance to have low threshold access to medicine to make the last mile by producing their medicine themselves. And on the other hand, they will increase their knowledge about the cultivation of minor crops, a knowledge which can be used even in the future for other crops. So, however, we are aware that we are still having a lot of obstacles which still lay in the way. And the biggest is the current lack of documented evidence. And this is evidence regarding safety efficacy of the application of the tea. And this is why we are so eager to support the common efforts in the consortium to find out, to get a proof whether it works, how it works, and to ensure safety and efficacy of the tea preparation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hagels, for this also other clarification and why Boehringer Ingelheim want to support the consortium. Mr. Bonneville, you were very patient. Thank you for that. Mérieux, because you work for Mérieux, as you said in the introduction, has a strong history of working with vulnerable communities on infectious disease. Where do you see a solution like Artemisia fitting within the broader fight against malaria?
Okay, so perhaps before directly addressing your question, I would like to briefly review what the Fondation Mérieux is actually doing and how this could match with your expectation regarding Artemisia. So Dr. Charles Mérieux created the Fondation Mérieux in 1967, and the objective was to find, through capacity building, infectious diseases that affect the most vulnerable. So the Fondation tries to tackle this problem through a multi-pronged approach that integrates, firstly, increased access to diagnosis for vulnerable population, for instance, through strengthening clinical biology laboratories. Secondly, through research capacity building with the support for young researchers with technical trainings on diagnostics, epidemiology, and clinical research management, and the fostering of South-South collaborative projects on epidemiology and clinical research, like the way it is planned in Gabon and Cameroon for Artemisia. Thirdly, through knowledge sharing, through the organization of courses and conferences on key infectious disease and public health problems that involve many stakeholders worldwide. And finally, actions for the mothers and child through a global health approach encompassing nutritional and educational components. So an efficient fight against malaria, like against many other global diseases, will certainly require holistic approaches integrating the above components, and they could certainly benefit from traditional medicines and solutions like Artemisia, for which we could expect a much better uptake by remote communities than for modern medicine derived from industrialized countries. The social health science component is actually not taken enough into consideration when designing global strategies against major public health concerns. And this is for me where traditional medicine-based approaches like the Artemisia solution could show their strongest added value.
So thank you very much, Mr. Bonneville, and thank you also to give us the Mérieux point of view. It is very important. I come back to Dr. Laktabai. As you told us, so you are based in Nairobi. My question would be, is there an opportunity, Dr. Laktabai, for innovative approaches, such as herbal remedies in eradicating malaria?
Thank you so much. So absolutely, there is a lot of opportunities for innovation when you look at the things that need to happen for malaria to be eliminated or brought to a level that it's not major cause of morbidity and mortality. That new therapies is indeed one of the opportunities that exist. And thinking about Artemisia as a plant, as some of the panelists have said, it's one of those things that can actually bring on board more people who are suffering from malaria, who prefer traditional remedies, herbal remedies to modern medicine, however effective the modern medicines may be. It is a class of people that would just not access it, who would begin with plants and compounds like the ones we are talking about. And also an exciting opportunity that you can have people participating in growing the medicine that they are consuming. So yes, I see this as a great opportunity for innovation and opening up ways for much higher uptake of medication among a certain group of people who are really the most vulnerable.
Thank you, Dr. Laktabai, for this optimistic answer. And I will ask a question to Dr. Cornet-Vernet. We spoke with Professor Borrmann, with Mr. Barale, Mr. Bonneville, Dr. Hagels about the clinical trial. My question would be, if successful, will the result of this clinical trial help you to scale your effort beyond West Africa, and how you see that?
If successful, this trial will ensure Artemisia tea is recognized as a medical first-line treatment against malaria by WHO. So it will facilitate marketing authorization from national ministries of health and spread the treatment not only in West Africa, but also in all malaria endemic regions. And if successful, this trial will also gain deeper knowledge of the benefits, the properties, dosage, and possible side effects of the Artemisia annua and Afra teas. So definitely it would be a very, very big step.
Good. And so just one point, because we have some echo. So if when you do not speak, you could mute your microphone, it would be much better. Thank you, Dr. Cornet-Vernet, for that also promising answer. And you spoke about WHO, and so this is my question to Mr. Barale, because I think the WHO is very, very important in this initiative, in this research. So my question would be, what is the position of the WHO on this project? And Mr. Barale, do you work with the WHO? I'm sure, but could you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, so WHO has a critical role for health recommendations throughout the world. And regarding malaria, you have to consider that there is almost 100 countries in which malaria is endemic. So when WHO gives a recommendation, it is very, very serious, and because it links health policy for 100 millions of people. So the official position of WHO regarding using Artemisia tisans was synthesized in a publication in October 2019, where they clearly stated that they do not have clear and rigorous rational evidences to recommend the use of Artemisia tisans. So they are clearly not recommending using these tisanes. And the reason is very simple, is that WHO, as a very official organization, cannot give or support usage of this or this therapy without strong and independent studies. However, indeed, we are in contact with WHO colleagues, and what they said to us is that they are contacted by several NGOs, including Maison de l'Artemisia, but also many others, regarding the subject of Artemisia tisans. And they are desperately lacking serious work to evaluate with a clinical approach usage of Artemisia tisans, and also no rational understanding of the mode of action. And so we are not working in my group on the clinical trial, but WHO needs this work, this data, and they also want to have a sort of understanding correlates with in vitro experiments. So of course we are in contact with WHO. Also, I want to mention something very important for WHO is just remember that 40 years ago, chloroquine was the most used antimalarials. And unfortunately, parasite resisting to chloroquine arrived in Africa, and it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare because it was during the 80s. And at that time, we did not have any other antimalarials. And so what WHO doesn't want is the same story happening with artemisinin resistance. They are very, very concerned about this issue. And resistant parasite to artemisinin already exist, mainly in Southeast Asia. So they really want to be sure that using these Artemisia tisans would not select for artemisinin-resistant parasites. And this is what we are also, this is why we are conducting this research in our groups.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Barale, for the position, an important position, and what is the thinking and the thought of the WHO. Professor Borrmann, we spoke about the clinical, and you spoke about clinical trial. My question would be, if the clinical trial is successful, and I hope so, how then would this result influence policy? And just because if you are not a speaker, could you put your camera off? I think Mr. Christian Manuel, yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. Now, Mr. Christian Manuel, I see if it's possible to just to keep, thank you very much. But all the speaker could put, Mr. Bonneville, all the speakers you could put, but it is where you are listener, just to mix, to avoid mix. Thank you. Excuse me for that, Mr. Professor Borrmann.
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, there's very little to add to what my predecessors already had pointed out. So WHO for the cannot currently recommend the use of artemisinin T based on the lack of the clinical evidence. So our aim here is simply to provide the clinical evidence using a randomized controlled clinical trial setup, something that is considered to be the gold standard. And if successful, of course, this would be a breakthrough. And we, of course, hope that WHO will then be able to modify recommendations. But of course, there may be other studies also be needed in the future. But so our studies, we consider them to be the proof of principle studies, as you would call them, phase 2 studies that are designed to provide the first firm evidence that yes, indeed, it works. It's both safe and it works. And so this is our aim. And of course, we hope that it will kick off a whole process and even more interest in the use of Artemisia and T. I also agree with the scenario pointed out before that, yes, there is a need for, besides the anti-malaria drugs that are being available, because clearly we all know that WHO continues to estimate about 400,000 deaths every year from malaria. And this is despite the free availability of artemisinin-based combination therapies in sub-Saharan African countries. So there is clearly a need. So there are populations that we do not reach with the officially sanctioned anti-malaria drug policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Borrmann. And this is now my question to Dr. Hagels, because Professor Borrmann spoke, and Dr. Hagels, how can partnerships between corporations like Boehringer Ingelheim and Professor Borrmann help to improve the access to unmet medical needs in vulnerable communities? And could you tell us a little bit more about the status of the funding to finance this research, as Professor Mann said, in Gabon and in Cameroon?
Yeah, I'm pleased to do that. So on the one hand, regarding your first question, I see the profit of the cooperation between the two of us, Steffen Borrmann, namely the University of Tübingen and Boehringer Ingelheim, as a cooperation between partners. We can bring some impulses in, we can provide even some knowledge regarding medication and even herbal medicinal products into the consortium and the University of Tübingen. And on the other hand, we're really pleased to have this cooperation because Steffen and his team, they provide so much experience regarding, in particular, treatment of malaria and the execution of clinical trials. And this is why Boehringer Ingelheim decided to at least fund a part of the planned trials. And regarding your second question, the current state of the funding, we need an overall funding for the efforts in Gabon, which Steffen does there together with Samel and the University of Tübingen, of overall 650,000 euros. And Boehringer Ingelheim will provide about 200 to 250,000 in there. So within 3 years, between, hopefully we start in the next year until 2025. But on the other hand, there's still a gap left. We still need another 400,000 euros for the 3 years. And this is why I also would like to advertise to become a partner within our common efforts. And so the clinical trial we plan together is Gabon, and another option is also the execution of a clinical trial in Cameroon, executed there by Pasteur Cameroon. They additionally need another 650,000 euros for also a time of 3 years. And we have already there's already a foundation which is involved with about 150,000 euros. That means there's also a gap which has to be financed.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Hagels, for all this clarification about Boehringer and about the funding. And I hope a lot of listeners, participants to this panel session will be keen to participate to this adventure, to these clinical trials in Gabon and in Cameroon. Mr. Bonneville.
More than pleased. We would.
Yeah, we welcome everybody.
Yeah.
Mr. Bonneville, where would you contemplate the strongest impact of solutions like Artemisia, but also their biggest challenges?
Well, as I said before, I think that traditional medicine-based solutions like Artemisia are expected to show limited barriers of adoption in communities, and in particular among the most remote ones. So I think that the greatest impact of Artemisia solution would be actually to reach these remote community, as long as protocols yielding reproducible efficacy of decoctions do not deviate too much from traditional recipes. So the affordability of Artemisia solutions and the fact that providers of this solution are expected to be located in low-resource countries directly affected by malaria are clearly additional advantages of the Artemisia approach, and that could strengthen its impact. So I think that the implementation of a randomized controlled trial on Artemisia, as already highlighted by several colleagues, offer a great opportunity to get a proof of principle and proof of concept of the anti-malaric efficacy of Artemisia decoction. But even if this efficacy is formally proven, generalization and scaling up of this observation will remain an important challenge, since it is very likely that the presence and concentration of anti-malaric active components will be affected not only by the way Artemisia plants are grown, under which climate and in which soil, and how the plants are processed and stored. So this issue of generalization could be addressed by the standardization efforts already undertaken by several colleagues, but by centralizing Artemisia plant production to a limited number of qualified providers, and by establishing reproducible in vitro assays, allowing easy but precise assessment of anti-malaric efficacy of a given batch of Artemisia plant. What I think will be the most challenging issue already raised by Jean-Christophe Barale in particular will be to formally rule out induction of resistance to anti-malaric drug like artemisinin. And hopefully the clinical trial planned in Gabon and Cameroon will certainly help address this issue as well. So I'm very supportive of this approach. I do hope that we will be able to be involved in one way or another in supporting these trials. And I wish that we will get a definitive answer to these various issues.
Thank you, Mr. Bonneville. And yes, we will be very happy if you one day could come on board. You will be more than welcome, you know. I think it's time now. We are just behind time with a question, and I see on the chat some question. Thank you, Dr. Hagels, to already answer to some of them. Maybe I read one question from Pamela. Evidence published on Artemisia infusion versus COVID indicates that the infusion are more potent than artemisinin. Indeed, artemisinin seems to antagonize the plant's effect, as we showed using 7 different cultivars with broad range of artemisinin. Someone wants very quickly, because it is 10 to 12, to answer to Pamela.
I may eventually comment on that. So there is a huge bibliography on Artemisia annua as an anti-infectious and also for conference.
Mr. Barale, your son is
traditional
not good.
Medicine.
Mr. Barale, your son is not good. We
My
didn't
son
hear you.
is not good. Wait.
Oh, it's okay now.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I wanted to comment on that. So there is a huge bibliography on Artemisia annua, and you have to remember that it is coming from ancient Chinese traditional medicine. And Pamela Weber's lab and work is certainly describing very, very accurately that it is an interesting antimalarials in different models that Pamela's work has shown. And indeed, we don't exactly know what is the difference between using pure artemisinin compared to Artemisia tisane in human being. Actually, there is only essentially works in laboratories, and we have to know how things. I just give you an idea. We know exactly the amount of artemisinin we need to kill the parasite, but we don't know what is the amount of artemisinin which circulates within the blood of human being when they are drinking a tisane. So this is the kind of thing that is not known. We don't know exactly what Artemisia tisane are doing on other stages. Dominique Mazier has shown it works on hepatic stages. That was not known before. We have preliminary data showing that eventually they have very faint effect on the transmission, but that has not been clearly shown before. It's the opportunity for me to say that 650 euros is, of course, an amount of money. But for a clinical trial, it is not expensive. And remember that it is going to be done in countries where people really need them. And in parallel, the way we are working is that we will also have knowledge research that we are doing with colleagues on hepatic stage, transmission, artemisinin sensitive and resistant. And we also have to fund this academic research.
Thank you for this clarification, Mr. Barale. I see a question, and I think it is important also, and thank you, Hans and Dr. Hagels, to answer this question, but maybe it's important to emphasize, because the question for Monsieur Lamboret, let us assume, no, it is not this one, because it has some question about the implication of Boehringer in the commercial activities. So, well, yes, what is in for Boehringer Ingelheim? And Dr. Hagels, could you just emphasize your answer, because I think it is also an important point to explain there is no commercial activity behind that.
Yes, no. So the background, why are people from Boehringer Ingelheim involved? And the clear answer is it's making more health, and with the initiative of making more health, we want to become involved in communities, in vulnerable communities, and want to provide a philanthropic part there. We are not interested in developing commercial profitable projects for BI. That's not the intention of our engagement in there. But it's based on the foundations of the thoughts of making more health.
Okay, thank you, because I think it was important to clarify that point. I see all the answer to the question, so I would come back to you and to conclude, because it is we are close to the end of this panel session. I would say to each of you, if you could do that in 30 seconds, it is a challenge, I know, but just to keep and to keep the timing. After hearing all of you, and perhaps in the same order as before, what would you like to add after this panel session in 30 seconds to the listener, to the participant, that has not been said and that you care about to those listening today? So if we could start with Dr. Laktabai in 30 seconds, and after that, it will be great, Dr. Cornet-Vernet, Mr. Barale, Professor Borrmann, Dr. Hagels, and Mr. Bonneville. Thank you. Dr. Laktabai, in 30 seconds. So, Dr. Cornet-Vernet, because maybe Dr. Laktabai have some issue with this.
Okay. What I have to say is we live here in north part of the world, and we don't know malaria anymore. More than half the world is living in malaria endemic countries, and we are very, very lucky here. And perhaps the it's not a big issue to fund 1 million or 2 million euros for these clinical trials, and I think it's our duty to do that, and that's why I created La Maison de l'Artemisia. I wanted to support, to help those people who don't have anything to heal their principal burden, malaria. And so let's go. And if someone hearing us can just help and give some money to do the trials, and we need them. We need this money. So let's go.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cornet-Vernet. I hope everybody listened to you. So in 30 seconds, because it's just 4 minutes before 11, before 12, Mr. Barale.
Thank you, Guillaume. 30 seconds to say first thank you to Dr. Hagels and all colleagues from Boehringer Ingelheim. We are now exchanging for more than 1.5 years or something. And let me tell you that I think one of the reasons why we have to have such a number of exchanges is that it is very important for a pharmaceutical company, even via its foundation, to work on something serious. And the way we have organized the consortium is to have chemists, clinicians like Steffen Borrmann and Antoine Berry from Toulouse, who will work in Cameroon, hopefully, knowledge scientists, and also sociologists to learn how people are taking these tisanes and all the aspects of markets. I think this is absolutely normal to be very, very, very rigorous on are you going to support a project or not? And it's because it's, I guess, very serious, very rigorous, but we want to address all together the point, do Artemisia active against Plasmodium? And for our part, it will be, how does it work? And do they select for resistance? It is a combination of expertises that we really want to get working together, thanks to the support of professionals. And again, thank you to make more for health and Boehringer, but also interactions with Dr. Bonneville. We look forward moving on from now to have the overall project started all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barale. Professor Borrmann. So, Professor Borrmann, you are on mute. Yeah, you were on mute. In 30 seconds, because it is very close to the end.
Yes, so basically, so also a thank you to everyone here. Let me say that we are ready to go. So the clinical trial setup, the team is ready to go at full disposal, including all the competencies available in Gabon, as well as in Cameroon. So we are ready to go, but we need more funding, which is important. So these clinical trials are important at the required quality. So we cannot start the study with only 50% or 30% of the funding. That would be unethical. Our ethics committee, in fact, would not allow us to start the clinical study. So please, everyone who is here present today, if you can help to get this off the ground, this would be most appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Borrmann. Dr. Hagels?
Yes, we got the chance to learn about, within the last hour, to learn about the chances we have. We commonly have to provide low threshold access to medicine to people in need. And let's use the chance. We brought, and it's in particular you, Guillaume, you brought the experts together. We have the people of the consortium, Jean-Christophe, Steffen, we have Lucile on board. So there are so many enthusiastic, passionate people. We still need some more funding to get the proof that it works. Please support us, please help us.
Thank you, Dr. Hagels. And last but not least, Mr. Bonneville.
Well, I think that traditional medicine could represent a sustainable and impactful approach to address many diseases affecting the most vulnerable, be they communicable or non-communicable. So the trial contemplated here in the context of malaria could provide a rationale for a new and more rigorous way to assess traditional medicines. And this could have a major impact well beyond the field of malaria.
So thank Mr. Bonneville. So thank you all of you for your participation to this panel session. What if a herbal plant could treat malaria? So as you saw, it's an amazing story. We really hope the fundings will be there for these two very important clinical, CERMEL in Gabon, Centre Pasteur in Cameroon, in Yaoundé. So if you are interested to fund, as you should have understood a part of the clinical research. So you could send a mail. You have 3 mails, so Professor Borrmann or Dr. Hagels or me, if you prefer. So it's time now to conclude this panel session. Thanks again a lot for your participation. Goodbye, Guayri, Wiedersehen, au revoir. Bye-bye, thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.